This is the face of a mass shooter, David Katz, showing no emotion as he plays in a Madden tournament against other pro gamers. Katz was an elite player known as Bread, who always had the same lifeless expression on his face whether he won or lost a game. During a professional Madden 19 tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, Katz refused to shake the hand of his opponent after losing to him and stormed out of the tournament. Shortly afterwards, he returned with 2 handguns and fired 12 rounds into the players and crowd. 2 people were killed and 10 others were wounded before Katz turned the gun on himself. This eerie photo shows the red dot from David's sight on the chest of 22-year-old victim Elijah Clayton, who made a last-minute decision to enter the tournament. It was later revealed that Katz had suffered from numerous mental illnesses and had been institutionalized several times throughout his life. EA Sports offered its most heartfelt sympathies and donated $1 million to the victims' families in lieu of the senseless tragedy. In 2009, 25-year-old chemistry student Vladimir Likonos died after his chewing gum exploded in his mouth. He had a strange habit of dipping his gum in citric acid for extra sourness, but accidentally used an explosive powder from his chemistry experiments that was 4 times stronger than TNT. Likely caused by the reaction with his saliva or chewing pressure, the explosion blew off his jaw and led to his eventual death. According to a 2011 study, children exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers exposed to combat. Throughout Chinese history, it was common for parents to castrate their boys as a way to escape poverty. Both the shaft and the nuts would be sliced off with a knife at the same time. These castrated members of society, known as eunuchs, were considered thoroughly pure and therefore qualified as high-ranking civil servants. This disturbing system lasted until 1924, with the last imperial eunuch dying in 1990, within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station Nightclub in 2003. Faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that 2 bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. Macho Man Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. An X-ray revealed that a 300-year-old Mexican statue of Jesus has real human teeth. They're believed to have been donated by worshippers as a way to get closer to the religious figure. After killing his girlfriend with a hatchet, 30-year-old Philadelphia man William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair. While it was supposed to demonstrate the effectiveness and humanity of electrocution, the punishment went horribly wrong. They underestimated the amount of electricity needed to quickly and painlessly end a man's life, so Kemmler was still conscious after the first shock. When physicians noticed he was still breathing in agony, they hit him with a second shock that was more powerful, causing his entire body to convulse violently and start smoking. Kemmler ended up with bubbling skin, melted eyes, and a foaming mouth, and the entire room reeked of burning flesh as many spectators ended up passing out from the horror. But despite this, the electric chair would still continue to be used for more than 100 years afterwards. In 2012, Donna Summer died from lung cancer at the age of 63, even though she wasn't a smoker. The singer believed it was caused by inhaling the toxic fumes from the Twin Towers after they fell on 9/11, since the dust filled the air around Ground Zero for several months afterwards, and Summer lived nearby. In fact, around 6,400 people have since died from 9/11 related illnesses, more than double the amount that died on the actual day of the attacks. The Dani tribe in Indonesia is known to cut off parts of their fingers after the death of a loved one. In 1928, Alfred Loewenstein, the third richest man in the world at the time, completely disappeared from his private jet in the middle of a flight. After Alfred took too long to use the bathroom, his secretary went in to check on him, but the bathroom was empty and the exit door connected to it was wide open. There have been many theories put forth, but Alfred most likely opened the wrong door by accident and plunged thousands of feet to his death. After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been seen nor heard from again. The 1985 film Mask is based on the true story of Rocky Dennis, an American boy with an extremely rare bone disorder. It causes bone to build up excessively in the skull, resulting in compression of the brain. Doctors initially told him he would die before his 7th birthday, but Rocky ended up living to the age of 16. After being told he would die if he didn't change his habits, a morbidly obese Scottish man went an entire year without eating any food. The 450-pound 27-year-old only consumed multivitamins and potassium tablets for 382 days, only going number 2 once every 40 to 50 days. He set a record for the longest fast ever recorded and ended up losing 275 pounds. French chemist Antoine Lavoisier wanted to perform one last experiment before he was executed in 1792. He told his colleague he would try to blink as long as possible after being beheaded by a guillotine. Some sources say he continued to blink for up to 10 seconds afterwards. Amanda Eller was lost for 17 days in the Maui wilderness after a 3-mile hike turned into a full-on nightmare. She set out on foot without a phone, food, or water since she only planned to be out for a short adventure. But after veering off the trail, she wasn't able to find her way back. The 35-year-old later managed to survive a flash flood with a broken leg and suffered many hallucinations throughout the ordeal. She said she kept hearing voices that were telling her what to do if she wanted to survive. Amanda was eventually spotted by a helicopter pilot who turned a different way that nobody would normally search on a whim. In 2022, an Irish woman was hospitalized with extreme stomach pain and had to have her appendix removed after years of holding in farts around her boyfriend. Constance Fisher was a paranoid schizophrenic who murdered her 3 children in 1954 to save them from evil. She spent several years in a mental asylum before being released, only to kill 3 more of her children in 1966. In 2014, author Richard Britton traveled 500 miles to find a teenage girl who left him a bad review on his recent book. then smashed a wine bottle over her head, sending her to the hospital where she nearly died. Richard was jailed for 30 months following the vicious attack. In 1971, 46-year-old New Jersey accountant John List lost his job at a bank and couldn't stand to tell his family. After a failed job search, List worried that his family would turn away from God due to a lack of stability and therefore miss out on heaven. So he felt he was left with no choice but to murder his entire family and disappear forever. He killed his wife, mother, and 3 children by gunshot before vanishing for the next 18 years. List had planned out the murders so meticulously that nearly a month had passed before anyone suspected that something was wrong. He assumed a new identity in Denver, remarried, and evaded capture for nearly 2 decades, until a neighbor finally recognized him after seeing him on America's Most Wanted. A 23-year-old college student from Taiwan was forced to have both of his legs amputated after suffering severe frostbite that his doctor couldn't believe was real. He claimed it was the result of being stuck outside after a bad motorcycle accident, but the truth was he'd stuck his legs in dry ice for more than 10 hours while trying to pull off a massive insurance fraud scheme. His friend and accomplice tied him to the chair, so he had no choice but to endure the excruciating ice burns. Instead of the $1.7 million payout they were hoping for, both of the young men were sent to prison for insurance fraud. This photo of Samantha Koenig was taken by serial killer Israel Keyes to convince the victim's family that she was still alive, so that he could demand $30,000 in ransom from them for her safe return. But in reality, Koenig had already been dead for several weeks, and Keyes had sewn her eyes open using fishing line. The family paid some of the ransom before the killer dumped Samantha's body in a lake and never contacted them again. This is when streaming gets taken way too far. A Russian YouTuber was recently sentenced to 6 years in a maximum security prison after he allegedly caused his pregnant girlfriend to die from hypothermia during a live stream. Known as Stas Reflay, the streamer reportedly forced his girlfriend onto a freezing cold balcony wearing nothing but her underwear. Sometime later, he pulled her back inside and appeared confused, saying, "Chat, she has no pulse, she's pale, she's not breathing." He then laid her lifeless body on the couch, opened up a bottle of liquor, and continued streaming for an additional 2 hours before authorities finally arrived. The streamer's actions were apparently part of a disturbing trend known as trash streaming that's popular in Russia, where streamers perform dangerous or degrading stunts for donations. According to reports, Stas was sent $1,000 by a viewer to watch him abuse his girlfriend. The 34-year-old only ended his stream after police entered his home and pronounced his girlfriend dead. Ira Hayes was a Native American Marine who was one of the men photographed raising the American flag over Iwo Jima in 1945. But despite national fame after the war, Hayes suffered from severe PTSD and descended deep into alcoholism. In January of 1955, he tragically ended up freezing to death while drunk in the Arizona desert. In 1958, the U.S. Air Force accidentally dropped a nuke on 4 kids playing in the woods of South Carolina. Thankfully, it didn't have its nuclear core installed yet, but still caused several injuries. Discovered at the age of 18, Susan Peters had a very successful acting career until she was shot during a hunting trip in 1945. Her husband's rifle accidentally fired into her spine, leaving her permanently paralyzed from the waist down. A few years later, one day Peters told her doctor, "I'm getting awfully tired. I think it would possibly be better if I just died." She then starved herself for the next few months until tragically dying from pneumonia at the young age of 31. Cyclopia is a real congenital disorder marked by the failure of the embryo to properly divide the orbits of the eyes into 2 separate cavities, resulting in a single eye in the middle of the face. It's usually caused by a mutation in the Sonic the Hedgehog gene, real, and typically results in death within a few hours after birth. The tragic condition occurs in 1 out of every 200 miscarried fetuses, and the maximum recorded lifespan of a child born with cyclopia is 1 day. Following the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, people have been putting up wanted posters across New York City targeting other healthcare CEOs. The posters read, "Healthcare CEOs should not feel safe," after his 28-year-old teacher allegedly made creepy remarks to a 6th grade girl. A young student catfished the man and made him think he was talking to a 14-year-old girl. After receiving concerning messages from the teacher, the boy reported him to police, and he now faces charges of sexual exploitation. During an SAS training exercise in 1996, 21-year-old Bear Grylls broke his back after falling 16,000 feet when his parachute failed to open. His surgeon wasn't sure if Grills would ever walk again, but the survival expert climbed Mount Everest just 18 months later, becoming the youngest Brit to ever do it. Here's a photo of 13-year-old Barbara Kent and her fellow campers playing in a New Mexico river, just hours before the first atomic bomb was tested 40 miles away from them. Over the next few days, the area was covered in fallout flakes that the campers thought was snow, only it was hot instead of cold. The US government had selected the site for its supposed isolation, but in reality, thousands of people were within a 40-mile radius and weren't evacuated nor warned before the test. Despite being diagnosed with 4 different types of cancers throughout her life, Barbara was the only girl in the above photo who lived past the age of 30, somehow making it to 83. In 2013, double amputee and 4-time Paralympic gold medalist Oscar Pistorius shot his girlfriend 3 times through a locked bathroom door, claiming he mistook her for an intruder. During his murder trial, Pistorius removed his prosthetics and hobbled on his stumps, while apparently attempting to garner sympathy and a more lenient sentence. But the judge wasn't buying it and sentenced the athlete to 15 years in prison for murder. This is the skeleton of a female vampire pinned to the ground with a sickle across her throat to prevent her from returning from the dead. It was found during an archaeological dig at a 17th century cemetery in Poland. In the late 1800s, there is an urban legend about a demonic figure roaming around the Arizona deserts that killed multiple people. It turned out to be a feral camel with the decaying corpse of a male soldier strapped to its back, likely the tragic result of Jefferson Davis's attempt to create a camel division in the U.S. Army. A 71-year-old man from Africa has lived in total isolation for 55 years to stay away from women. At the age of 16, he locked himself into a home secured by a 15-foot fence to avoid any possible interactions with females. He reportedly suffers from gynophobia, an irrational fear of women. A 26-year-old mum from the UK has died after traveling to Turkey for a Brazilian butt lift. The official cause of death was a fat embolism after some of the injected fat apparently entered her bloodstream. Many health professionals consider BBLs to be barbaric procedures because of the significant health risks associated with them that are seldom discussed. In July of 1518, a French woman ran from her house and started dancing fervently in the street. Within a week, a few dozen others had joined her, and by the next month, hundreds fell victim to this dancing plague. They danced completely uncontrollably and seemingly without reason, often for days on end, until they collapsed from exhaustion or even died from heart attacks or strokes. Up to 400 people in total died before the phenomenon suddenly stopped. It's widely believed that the dancing plague was caused by stress-induced hysteria or poisoning from a wheat fungus called ergot. This 2022 photo shows 40-year-old Russian mother Anna Uskova moments before she jumped into a frozen river. She was apparently following a Christian Orthodox tradition of Epiphany and believed that jumping into the frigid water would rid her of sin. However, she jumped in at a bad angle and was quickly swept away by the powerful current, trapping her under the ice. Her husband immediately jumped in to rescue her while their children screamed in horror, but his efforts were unsuccessful and her body was recovered 10 days later. This was the truck belonging to Missouri town bully Ken McElroy after he was killed in broad daylight by an angry mob in 1981. Over the course of his life, McElroy was accused of dozens of felonies, including assault, child molestation, burglary, animal cruelty, arson, and statutory grape. He always managed to escape serving time until eventually being convicted of attempted murder, but McElroy appealed and was released on bond before he immediately threatened to kill several people. An angry mob then showed up at the bar he was drinking at and shot him several times in his truck while he was attempting to leave. Despite over 40 different witnesses, nobody admitted to seeing the murder take place and no one has been charged to this day. In 2016, a man who'd been continuously stalking Miranda Cosgrove apparently plotted to murder her. For 3 days, the stalker had been burying various weapons in Cosgrove's backyard, including knives and a rope. One day, he spent hours pacing around the area and eventually shot at a woman who looked like the iCarly actress. The man then performed self-immolation before turning the gun on himself right in Cosgrove's yard. Miranda has stated that she still lives in the same house but refuses to stay there alone ever since that traumatic incident. Earlier this year, inmates at a Miami prison managed to birth a child without ever even meeting each other face to face. 23-year-old Joanne DePaz and 29-year-old Daisy Link, both imprisoned for separate murder charges, started talking to each other through the air vents before falling in love and eventually wanting kids. Using a makeshift line made out of bedding, they passed Joanne's erectoplasm through the vents, while Daisy used a yeast infection applicator to inseminate herself. Against all odds, the plan worked, and the baby was born healthy. The pair are now in different prisons, while Joanne's mother is raising their baby girl. Starting when his son Uday was only 11 years old, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein often took the boy to witness his enemies being brutally tortured. These experiences apparently had a profound impact on young Uday, who grew up to become far worse than his father. His own relatives and personal acquaintances were reportedly terrified of him, since Uday was known to grape, torture, and murder anyone who disappointed him. During a dinner party in 1981, Uday murdered his dad's personal valet by repeatedly stabbing him with a carving knife in front of dozens of horrified guests. In 1995, Uday went on a shooting rampage at another party after his uncle made fun of his speech impediment. The shooting left 6 bodyguards dead and his uncle seriously injured, prompting Saddam to set his son's luxury car collection on fire. Uday was also known to arrest and torture Iraqi Olympic athletes when they didn't win a medal. In 2003, Uday was finally killed by an American task force at the age of 39. Russian scientist Anatoly Bugorsky worked as a physicist on the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union. In 1978, he was checking a malfunctioning piece of equipment when one of the safety mechanisms failed, causing a high-energy proton beam to pass directly through his head. He reportedly saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but didn't feel any pain. The beam had burned through parts of his skin, bone, and the brain tissue underneath, causing the left half of his face to swell up beyond recognition. Since it was believed that he received far more than a fatal dose of radiation, Bugorsky was taken to a clinic in Moscow where doctors could document his certain death. But miraculously, Bugorsky survived, completed his PhD, and continued working as a particle physicist. Nearly 50 years later, he's still alive to this day with relatively minor symptoms. This is the skull of a young girl whose remains were found in the trash deposit of a Jamestown fort building in 2013. As evidenced by the butchery marks seen on her forehead, she was believed to be the victim of cannibalism at the Jonestown colony in the winter of 1609. Known as the Starving Time, this period was marked by extreme desperation when it came to finding food due to a severe drought. The governor of Jamestown, George Percy, wrote that colonists ate horses, dogs, cats, vermin, and even dug up corpses from graves to consume. In one case, he reported that a man killed his pregnant wife, butchered her, preserved her with salt, and consumed her. Only 61 out of the original 500 colonists managed to survive the brutal winter. While investigating the illegal shark fin trade for the BBC special Gordon's Shark Bait in 2011, Gordon Ramsay and his crew were attacked by a group of men linked to drug networks in Costa Rica. They were held at gunpoint, doused with petrol, and told they would be killed if they continued filming. The shark fin trade continues to flourish to this day due to the high demand of shark fin soup, resulting in about 100 million sharks being killed every year. This was the obituary of Kathleen Dehmlow, who doesn't appear to be missed by her family. Here's a photo of Barbara Graham saying goodbye to her 2-year-old son Tommy before being executed via gas chamber in 1955. She was convicted for her part in the brutal murder of elderly widow Mabel Monahan during a home invasion gone wrong. In 1988, Hawaiian musician Israel Kana'i Kamakawi Vole called the owner of a recording studio at 3 a.m. when he was so eager to record his new idea. Despite having obviously closed for the night, the studio owner agreed since Israel was such a nice guy. Within 15 minutes, they recorded his ukulele rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow in just one take. Sadly, Israel struggled with morbid obesity throughout his life, at one point weighing over 750 pounds. After enduring several hospitalizations due to respiratory and cardiac issues, the legend would end up dying of respiratory failure at the young age of 38. In 1978, Sex Pistols bassist Sid Vicious and his girlfriend Nancy Spungen hosted a party in their New York City hotel room, the morning after which Nancy was found dead in the bathroom with a single stab wound to her abdomen. Despite being comatose on drugs the entire night and having zero recollection, Vicious admitted to the stabbing and was charged with her murder. Many believe that Nancy was actually killed by a drug dealer who was attempting to rob the drugged-up couple, and that Vicious was totally incapable of harming her considering the state he was in. But the bass player ended up dying of a drug overdose while out on bail before he could stand trial, and the case was closed. In 1996, Maryland woman Sharon Lopatko was killed in a bizarre case of consensual homicide. She had emailed dozens of men asking them to torture and kill her for mutual sexual gratification before meeting a man named Robert Glass who would follow through with her request. One morning, Sharon left her husband a note saying she would never return and told him not to track down her killer. Glass ended up strangling her to death and was soon arrested after police found the emails and discovered Sharon's body on his property. He admitted to fulfilling her torture fantasy, but also maintained that her death was an accident. Glass pled guilty and was sentenced to 3 to 5 years before dying of a heart attack while in prison. In 1994, 13-year-old Texas boy Nicholas Barkley went missing after playing basketball with some friends. 3 years later, he was found in Spain and reunited with his family, but something was very off. The boy who came back had darker hair, brown eyes instead of blue, and a French accent, while looking much older than Nicholas would have been at the time. But perhaps blinded by grief, the Barkley family accepted this boy without question despite these major differences. To be fair, he claimed his kidnappers had taken him to France, dyed his hair, and changed his eye color to hide his identity. But a private investigator would soon reveal the boy's true identity as Frederick Bourdin, a 23-year-old Frenchman with a history of impersonating missing kids. Bourdin had apparently been searching for love and affection that he never received as a child. Known as the chameleon, he's assumed over 500 false identities throughout his life, including those of orphans. Meanwhile, the true fate of Nicholas Barkley remains unknown to this day. A 22-year-old woman from Ireland was recently left with severe internal injuries after her butt plug was pulled through her body during an MRI scan. She apparently believed she was safe to insert it before the procedure, believing the plug was made entirely of silicone. But it actually contained a metal core, causing it to react to the scanner's powerful magnets. She's expected to recover in the hospital, but this is why doctors always say you should never wear a butt plug while getting an MRI. In another ridiculous MRI case in 2023, a Brazilian lawyer tragically died after a scanner caused his gun to fire inside of the machine. After being repeatedly asked by doctors to remove all metal objects, Leandro Novaes decided not to reveal that he had a gun in his waistband, which ended up firing into his stomach. He spent several weeks in the hospital before succumbing to his costly bad decision. This case was a big reason why doctors always remind their patients to remove any firearms before receiving an MRI. In 1996, a stalker named Robert Dewey Hoskins told Madonna's assistants that he would slash her throat from ear to ear unless she married him. He then jumped the fence at the singer's home before being shot by a bodyguard, but survived and was arrested. Madonna would later testify against Hoskins in court, saying she felt sick to her stomach just being in the same room with him and had recurring nightmares about him chasing her. After being deemed highly psychotic and extremely violent, Hoskins was sent to a mental hospital, which he briefly escaped from in 2012. Just last year, a zookeeper from Uzbekistan was eaten alive while attempting to round up 3 lions that escaped from their enclosure. He apparently recorded the entire ordeal on his phone while attempting to impress his girlfriend, as his deathly screams could clearly be heard in the footage. Rescuers say they had no choice but to tranquilize 2 of the lions, while shooting the 3rd dead before finding the zookeeper's mangled remains. In 2013, a Swedish prisoner escaped from the facility because he had a severe toothache and was denied medical care. He broke out, saw a dentist who pulled out his tooth, and then turned himself back in. This was the last photo ever taken of Marco Siffredi, the first man to descend Mount Everest on a snowboard. He was attempting his 2nd descent in 2002 when Sherpas urged him not to go due to bad weather conditions, but Siffredi ignored their warnings and was never seen again. In 1999, Little League baseball player Kevin Stephen was hit in the chest by a baseball bat, causing his heart to suddenly stop. Luckily, off-duty nurse Penny Brown was in attendance and saved the boy's life by giving him CPR. 7 years later, Penny Brown was choking at a restaurant when one of the workers rushed over to give her the Heimlich maneuver, thus saving her life. That worker was Kevin Stephen. Jacques Hebert was a revolutionary French journalist during the Reign of Terror, who was heavily in favor of beheading anyone who disagreed with his radical views. After he accused Marie Antoinette of incest with her son, Hebert was sentenced to death via guillotine. He reportedly fainted several times on the way to his execution and screamed hysterically when placed under the blade. To amuse the crowd and make a statement, the executioners rigged the blade to stop inches from Hebert's neck. They did this 3 times before finally executing him on the 4th attempt. While filming for Gladiator, Oliver Reed died suddenly after challenging a group of sailors to a drinking contest at a bar. The actor consumed 8 pints of beer, 12 shots of rum, several shots of cognac, and an entire bottle of whiskey. He fell ill during the match and collapsed, dying of a heart attack in the ambulance en route to the hospital. It ended up costing the production company $3 million to recreate Reed's face with CGI, so he could appear in all the scenes that still needed to be filmed. Here's a photo taken by Challenger Deep of a beer bottle resting on the ocean floor 35,000 feet down, the deepest known point on the Earth's surface. This is the last known photo taken of Janet Johnson, a famous American mountaineer known for completing many difficult climbs throughout the world. She disappeared along with her friend John Cooper during a climb in 1973, until their bodies were found separately 2 years later, both wearing just one shoe and missing their ice picks. Cooper was found with a bloody wound on his stomach and a look of horror frozen on his face. Accordingly, several people, including examiners of the autopsy, believe that both Cooper and Johnson were murdered. The photo above was only discovered in 2020 when climbers found Janet's backpack and camera within the melting glacier.